Additional aids and services are available to individuals with disabilities. To make such a request, please contact us by email, by clicking the Help tab in the PD portal, or at pdportal@tamu.edu, by phone, including Relay Texas at 1-800-441-7323, or in writing to Train PD, PD Portal Support, 4477 TAMU, College Station, Texas 77843. Both a transcript and accessible document of the content presented in this webinar can be found as resources in the course description. Click on the blue links under Course Resources in the description. When a link is clicked, a new browser window will open.
All right, everybody. So welcome to Engaging Students with Motivational Interviewing. My name is Olga Escamilla, and I also have my co-presenter, Liz Moya. We want to get started with our session. So I want to also welcome my co-presenter, Liz Moya.
Hi, everybody. So glad to be here.
So welcome to Engaging Students with Motivational Interviewing, and let's get started. So some of the information from this session was derived from Using Motivational Interviewing to Help Students by L.A. Sheldon. And there are session resource information, and we could provide that if needed. Then additional information for the session was also derived from the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers, or MINT. So I just wanted to let y'all know where we received our information. And our objectives for today, we're going to introduce the research-based strategies used for student interviewing, or the MI principles. We're going to learn what motivational interviewing is not, and then we're going to learn how to ask the right questions to strengthen a student's motivation. We're also going to have an activity that we're going to ask you to participate in the chat. So our first activity is, what is motivational interviewing to you? So think about it and give me a definition in the chat.
Stella says interviewing that encourages students to share. Suzanne says interactive exchange with student. Anne says probing what the job seeker wants and then stretching them. Ooh, I like that. Glenda adds asking open-ended questions to build rapport with the student to see what their goals are. Eduardo adds it is a positive way to communicate with the students with potential employers. Mike adds your demeanor, body language in response. And fun interviewing, says Susan. And Mike Science adds in-depth interview questions. Oh, and Yvette adds trying to connect and communicate with students.
Nice, very good. So all encompassing, very nice. We got a lot of different responses and they're all great. So motivational interviewing is a collaborative, person-centered form of guiding our students to elicit and strengthen motivation for change. So yes, all great. The whole thing in terms of motivation, interviewing is to bring out the students' motivation to want to move forward or bring a change in something they might be doing in their lives and in general. So very good. Awesome. So let's continue with motivational interviewing qualities.
Yes, there are several components that are involved in motivational interviewing. And we're going to take a peek at the qualities. So right here we have a mnemonic. I love mnemonics. This is GER. And we're going to explore what each of those letters represents. And we're going to begin with the first one, the letter G. And this represents the guiding style of communication when using motivational interviewing. And this means that it sits between following of being a good listener and also directing the person who's speaking, giving them information and advice. It's a process of facilitation to encourage additional information and withholding judgment. And then we go into the letter E. This is designed to empower people to change by drawing out their own meaning, importance, and capacity for change. And this is where we place people in a position where they are aware of what they can be to spark something new. Then we switch over to R. And this is based on a respectful and curious way of being with people that facilitates the natural process of change and honors the client's autonomy. For those familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that framework states that an individual must feel safe before any learning can occur. So ensuring that one's approach in interviewing consists of respect, having courtesy, those are extremely important. And so to sum up the qualities, again, using GER, we have the guiding style of communication and empowering our speaker, and always ensuring that we are respectful and that we approach it with a curious way of interaction. So let's talk about some additional elements.
Thank you, Liz. MI is practiced with an underlying spirit or way of being with people. So the elements of this are partnership, because we are communicating with our students. Evocation, it's evoking, right? And we'll talk about these in a little bit in depth as I continue. Acceptance and compassion. So let's review each one. So partnership. So motivational interviewing is a collaborative process, and we've kind of been saying that it's between yourself and your student. It's a process that you're working through. And as we practice this, we are, as the MI practitioner, because we are going to be using these techniques with our students, we're going to be distinguished as the expert in helping our students change and helping our students, because they are the experts of their own lives. So again, we're the experts of helping them change, and they are the experts of their own lives. So that partnership together. So then we have evocation. And evocation is what we have within ourselves, these resources and skills needed for change. So when we use the technique of motivational interviewing, that draws out the person's priorities, their values, and the wisdom to explore reasons for change and support success. And then we have acceptance. So the MI practitioner, or we, if we're practicing motivational interviewing, we take a non-judgmental stance, seeking to understand our students' perspectives and experiences. And we express empathy, highlight strengths, and respect a person's right to make informed choices about changing or even not changing, right? Because we're trying to evoke that within our students, as we mentioned. And then we have compassion. So we, as we practice MI, as we use these skills, we want to actively promote and prioritize our students' welfare and well-being in a selfless manner. And think about where our students are coming from, because we know that our students have been through so much, and it's taken them so much to get to our program. You know, they've taken these huge steps to come and say, hey, I need help. I want to move forward. I want to reach my goals. So again, that compassion when we're having these conversations. So let's continue with ORS, or the MI core skills.
You know, Olga, as you're sharing these qualities and core elements, I consider those core elements and qualities as setting the stage, right? When you're going to prepare a meal in your home, you want to set up the kitchen. You have your utensils ready, you have your ingredients ready to go before you even start cooking. And so that's what those core elements and qualities are. It's having that backdrop to ensuring that it's a safe and welcoming environment, checking yourself on your demeanor and in your approach. And so now we're going to go into the motivational interviewing core skills. The skills are your output. What are you saying? What are you doing in the actual interview? And so we're using this visual framework to explore ORS. And we stop at the very top with open-ended questions, moving to the right with affirmation, down at the bottom with reflection, and then summarizing. So we're going to explore each of these, beginning with open-ended question. And I think that's probably one that we're most familiar with. In open-ended questions, we want to ensure that we are not using closed-ended questions. So we don't want yes or no responses. We want the individual, whether it's a student or not, to be able to express themselves fully. So it really depends on the question that we ask. For those of us who are in the classroom, we're familiar with WH questions, right? What or how, when, those type of questions that the student can or the participant can elaborate on. But we have some additional examples of what that looks like. And we could say something like, tell me more about such and such. When a student or a person that we're working with, sometimes they're reluctant to speak, they really don't know us. And sometimes we ask them really tough questions and they're kind of thinking in their head, why are you asking me this? So they'll give us like a really short answer. And these are some ways to elicit that additional information, right? Tell me more about what happened next. So I'm going to ask you out there if you can provide some additional examples of open-ended questions that either you've used in the past or that you kind of want to just invent right now. And go ahead and post those in the chat, please. Tell me about yourself. Yes, that is a good example of an open-ended question. Thanks, Mike. Why should I hire you? Okay, good. Eduardo says, give me the answer in your own words. Perfect. I use talk about that more. Okay, yes. Talk about more. Talk about such and such, right? Yes. Thank you, Stella. What is your favorite blank and why? Says Susan. Ha adds, tell me about a time when. And Mike adds, can you expand on that? Very good. Very good examples. Let's go into the next item in ORS, which is affirmation. So affirmation focuses on the strengths and efforts and the past successes that help to build the person's hope and their confidence so that they can recognize that they have the ability to change. Affirmations are genuine statements that recognize a client's strengths. They assist in building rapport and in helping the person see themselves in a different and more positive light. So again, to be effective, you have to be sincere. You have to come from a place of being genuine. And it's important to use those affirmations to help, in our case, students or even our coworkers, depending on the context, right? To feel that change is possible even when previous efforts have been unsuccessful. So this means that using affirmation involves reframing behaviors or concerns as evidence of positive qualities, and that's a key element. So when we focus on what is working, even if it's the smallest of steps, you'd be surprised that what a world of a difference it makes when someone acknowledges your efforts. So affirmation is the second portion of supporting self-efficacy in using ORS. And then we'll go to the third one. Let me give you some examples, right? So some of the examples of affirmation are, you did very well on the last exam, or I noticed that you arrived to class on time. I appreciate that. Can you think of any other examples of affirmation that you've used in the past or that come to mind, or maybe you'd like to use? Stella says, I like the way you shared. Thank you. Yes, that is a good example. Mike says, well said. And I would also like to add, like in the first example here of affirmation where it says you did very well on the last exam, I would take it a step further and be specific. What exactly did they do well on the last exam? We don't want to use cookie cutter responses like, oh, you did great, or that was fantastic. What was so fantastic? What was so great? And so Eduardo adds, now I see that you like the subject. You finished your homework. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Susanna has great examples, good sharing. Nancy says, how can you ask students to share their affirmations? Oh, that is a good thing. For me, students, especially ELL students, and I don't want to make generalities, but I found that they have difficulty thinking of themselves in a positive light for the most part, but journaling seemed to help because it was a private, intimate thing that no one else had to see. And if they wanted to share their journal with me, then that was one way that I can provide some one-on-one response without communicating it to the rest of the class. But Bertalice answers text recognition on their cell phone. So yes, that is a really good strategy. Susan ask, has that happened to you? Or how would you react to that? See, wisdom of the crowd. Great. So let's move on to our next phase, which is reflection. And reflections are based on careful listening and trying to understand what the person is saying by repeating and rephrasing or offering a deeper guess about what the person is trying to communicate. So this is a foundational skill for motivational interviewing, and it demonstrates how we express empathy. So reflections or reflective listening is perhaps the most crucial skill in motivational interviewing. It has two primary purposes. The student comes to feel that they are understood from their perspective, and the reflective listening is a crucial piece in guiding the student toward change. Part of the reflection process is pointing out the negative aspects of staying where they are and the positive aspects of making change. So sometimes when you are able to reflect on the student's behalf of what you heard, of where they are now, and where they might potentially be headed to, it's as if the student is hearing it for the first time because it's coming out of someone else's mouth. And so it is an important piece that you might consider. I see here, Sigrid says that comment is very insightful and thought-provoking. Stella says, I recast often. Great. Glenda says, yes, you must reflect back to them what they said. That lets them know you are listening. Absolutely. And so here are some examples of what reflection might sound like or look like. It sounds like you want to create new study habits, but you don't know where to start. If I'm hearing you correctly, you prepared for the exam by reading the chapter notes, but that was not enough. So those are some examples of reflection. Now let's look at summarizing. And in summarizing, this skill set ensures that understanding and it reinforces key points made by the student. Summaries are a special type of reflection where one recaps what has occurred in all or part of the session when you're speaking with a student. Summaries communicate interest, understanding, and they bring attention to important elements of the discussion. They may also be used to shift attention or direction and prepare the student to move on. When summarizing, it is important to strategically select what information should be included and what could be minimized or excluded. And we know as we're working with individuals, some individuals like to go on a tangent, and summarizing allows us to capsulate the gist of what we're to focus on for that moment. And it also demonstrates to the participant, to the student, what you captured from what they said. Okay. And so let's look at some examples of summarizing. So today we discussed some possible solutions to get you to class on time and learned that you want to take action to help solve the problem. And so those are, again, we talked about setting that backdrop for the components and the key elements. And then we also talked about the skill sets. But it's so easy to dive into what motivational interviewing is not. So Olga, you want to share I love what you did here.
Thank you so much, Liz. I love the ORS process. So now that we know what motivational interviewing is, let's talk about what it's not. So let's continue. So MI is not a way of tricking people into doing what they do not want to do. Remember, it's about evoking that change or not. So it's not a verb. You don't MI someone. You don't do mind control. MI is not a technique. So it shouldn't be equated with any technique. It's more complex than just that simple technique. It's better understood as a communication method, a complex skill that's learned with considerable practice over time. So as we talk about MI and we talk about the different skills and the qualities we need, it's important to keep those in mind and keep practicing them, because we're going to, as we use these, as we learn about these and use these, we become better as we continue to include these in our conversations with our students. So according to one MI study, it is a guiding style for enhancing that intrinsic motivation for our students to evoke that change. So it's not an exploration of pros and cons. It's not constructing a table elaborating on benefits, costs, potential benefits, or potential cost of change. The focus of motivational interviewing is on eliciting the student's own change talk and taking care not to reinforce counter change talk or resistance. So it's about selectively eliciting and reinforcing our students' own arguments and motivations for change. So it's a decisional balance. Remember, where one of the things that I stated really early on, it's walking them through this conversation, this motivational interviewing, and either evoking change or not, depending upon that student. And feedback from assessments can be useful and can provide topics for discussion and may uncover potential reasons for change that hadn't even been evident before. So the assessment feedback is not an essential element of motivational interviewing, nor does providing such feedback constitute motivational interviewing. So one of the things is, does not require assessment feedback. Yes, we provide assessment feedback, but does not require this type of feedback. Now we can say, you did excellent on the test. What did you do to study? Let's keep doing that. Let's keep looking at, reading your notes. I think one of the examples was, it looks like you looked at some of your notes that you took in class. So it's about making those kind of comments to keep eliciting those types of behaviors, and not about saying, here, this test, look at your score, etc. I mean, yes, we do cover that, but that's not part of this motivational interviewing. So motivational interviewing is simple, but not easy. It involves a complex set of skills that are used flexibly, responding to moment changes in what our students say, right? It's all based on the conversation that we're having, and we need to be ready with our motivational interviewing skills. Again, the practice of it's going to make us even better. So learning motivational interviewing is rather like playing a complex sport or a musical instrument. It's not a tricky technique that's easily learned or mastered. So it involves a conscious and disciplined use of specific communication principles and strategies to evoke that person's own motivations for change. So again, not a technique that you could sit behind a desk and use the same technique for everyone. Motivational interviewing is not what you're already doing. Some people are like, yeah, I already do that. That seems to be the common comment on the initial exposure to motivational interviewing. Sure, I motivate my students. I listen to them. Guiding involves a flexible blend of informing, asking, and listening. It resembles a familiar approach to helping, but in a refined manner that uses reflective listening in guiding our students to resolve unsureness about behavior change. So it also involves retaining clarity of purpose and calmness in the face of often irrational or seemingly contrary motives, and using thoughtful, reflective listening statements to facilitate change. And I think it was Susan, she mentioned in terms of the what, where, when, how, and who, and not why, because it's judgmental. So keeping those things in mind is very important when we're using this strategy, our motivational interviewing. So with that, let's move on to our MI activity. And our activity is about identifying ORs. So Liz and I are going to be reading a sample dialogue using, and there's a lot of the ORs, the open-ended questions, the affirmations, the reflections, and the summarizing are going to be within our dialogue. So we want you to determine which you recognize and place your answers in the chat as we go.
Let me see if I understand, Olga. So you and I are going to do some acting, and the participants are going to have to identify which ORs, and they put that in the chat.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So they're going to put open-ended or affirmation, reflection, summarizing. Okay. And folks, we made it a little simple. Instead of having 4 options, we knocked it down to 3 options. As we move forward, you'll have to choose which one or ones are being expressed at the time.
All right, everybody. So let's get started. So as we read the scenario and you hear an ORS, type it in the chat, and then we'll let you know.
Okay.
We'll let you know.
I am ready.
So, all righty.
This is my acting debut. Here we go. Hey, Diana, I noticed you haven't followed through on any of the appointments with me to take a look at your education and career plan. How are you feeling?
I feel good. I don't really need help with it. I've got it under control.
Great. What are some of your thoughts about your plan so far? I would love to hear them.
I want to be a nurse, and I know that the college has a program there because my friend told me about it. So I'm going to sign up for that nursing program and then be a nurse. I told you I got this.
Nursing. What a wonderful goal. I'm not too familiar with that specific program, though. Can you tell me some more about it?
Well, I heard it's a 2-year plan. So once I get my high school equivalency, then I can go there and I'll be done in 2 years.
I am hearing some great goals for you, and also that you're recognizing that there are some steps to completing your plan. These steps I'm hearing from you sound rather simplified. Get your GED, go to school, finish in 2 years. What obstacles do you think might come into contact with during that time span?
It'll probably be hard because I work, I have kids at home. School now is hard, but I'm here and I get most of my work done. So I don't really need to sit down with you and make a career plan or an education plan. That's why I haven't been coming in to our meetings. Sorry.
Well, you are certainly dedicated and goal-driven. I've seen the enthusiasm you have in the classroom, which is very important, given your goal of exploring the nursing career pathway. You've identified some obstacles that could present themselves as some pretty challenging barriers to overcome at the same time. How do you plan on attending what would most likely be a day nursing program when you work full-time and have kids at home?
I didn't really think about that. I guess I could take evening nursing classes. Do they have those?
It sounds like you have some questions about what your plan might entail.
I guess I need some more info about the schedule at the college and what school would look like.
Awesome, Diana. I would love to sit with you and talk about that some more.
Can we make an appointment?
Yes. When would that work best for you? And we have end scene. So thank you for playing along and keeping up with us. So thank you for that. And so a true measure of understanding what we have discussed is application, right? When we meet with our students and we provide a lesson, how do we know that that lesson resonated with our students? Well, we have application. So now we're going to have an additional exercise. We're going to do more of the same. No more acting. Sorry, I know. Don't cry. It's okay. But we are going to provide some scenarios for you, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to identify whether what you see in those scenarios, if it is utilizing or expressing open-ended questions, affirmation, reflection, or summarizing. Okay. So, and you're going to post those in the chat.
Okay, first one.
I guess if I knew what to study, it could help me feel better.
Ruth, you are a very capable student and you have proven to yourself that you are ready to take the GED test. Today, you indicated how you will prepare for your tests moving forward.
Okay. So,
All right. So what do you think it is? Yeah. Affirmation, says Kippy. Affirmation. We're getting a lot of affirmation. It looks like affirmation. So
Also summarizing?
Summarizing. Who said summarizing?
Stella?
Ooh.
Stella, yes, there is also summarizing. Yeah, Kippy says also summarizing. Definitely. So it's a combo. It's an affirmation and summary. Thank you. Very good. All right. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so Angela is routinely late to class, and her instructors have asked you to speak to her about it.
When you arrive late to class, it disrupts other students. You miss some of the important parts of the class, which affects your ability to do well. Earlier in the semester, you were arriving on time. What has changed?
Okay, we're getting open-ended. Okay, open-ended. You think there's a little bit of judgment in there?
And actually, motivational interviewing isn't going to be all rosy colored lens. It is speaking about the negative with the positive. Sometimes you have to highlight the negative in order to create some change. When you're indicating, in this case, that they're arriving late to class. And why is that important? Well, when you arrive late, you're disrupting the class. So you might think you're arriving late to class and it has no bearing on anything or anyone else, but in reality it does. So you're bringing that awareness to the student. It might sound harsh in the fact that we're bringing it to their attention, but unless you bring it up to the attention, they won't know why. They won't get the buy-in as to why they need to change. So I can definitely understand your perspective on that. And so we do have some open-ended responses along with reflection. And yes, that reflection is indicating their past behavior and what is happening now. So absolutely. Awesome. Thanks. I think we're ready for the next.
Thank you. And yeah, Quincy said also reflective. So thank you very much. All right, next one.
Yeah, sorry about that. I stayed up late a lot and then I overslept and missed the bus.
It sounds like morning classes are a challenge for you. Reflective and summarizing.
Okay, so somebody summarizing, you're saying reflective, summarizing. Okay, it is reflective. It is reflective.
Yes, it is. And it's also expressing empathy, which is, I know that we're speaking about ors, but I do want to go back to the qualities, right? It sounds indicating that it's a challenge for the student. Now you're empathizing. So as far as reflection, that is occurring, but I also wanted to point out that empathy is being used. So great job, everybody.
Great job. One more. Let's, Suzanne
Yes.
says, showing that you understand. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. Last one.
I'm afraid to take the test because I may not pass.
I see you took the GED Ready test in RLA and scored 172 in 2021. That's a fantastic score. You recently took it again and scored a 148. Congratulations. What is your plan moving forward?
Susan says affirmations and open-ended question, right on the money. Very good. Open-ended, says Eduardo. Open and affirm. Very good. Yes, open-ended and affirmation, says Ha. Great job, y'all.
And because the navigator is talking about the student's past, right? They're They're talking about what they scored in the past and what they scored now. Is reflection, because they're also indicating, it's not something that the student shared, it's rather something that the navigator is presenting. So it is open-ended, there is affirmation, and there is some reflection. But these are tough, right? It's tough to identify what is going on, because there's just so many elements going on at once.
Thank you, Suzanne and Stella. Thank you so much for being our student and our navigator. So at this point, does anyone have any questions about ORS? Again, when we're looking at these conversations and when we're looking at our samples, our conversations, and when we had our acting debut, our sample dialogue, it's easy to recognize the different ORs throughout the conversation. But how I think about and reflect on how you would use this, and how, again, remember, as I mentioned throughout the session, that MI takes practice. And Stella says she's going to work to recognize how she communicates. And that's awesome. Yeah, think about it. How are we communicating with our students? And look at these different various aspects, the qualities and the principles, and think about how we're incorporating this type of motivational interviewing and this kind of talk, those different aspects, into our conversations with our students. Liz, anything else you want to share?
Yeah, what comes to mind is, okay, we talked about the core elements, we talked about the qualities, we looked at some examples, and we talked about what motivational interviewing is not. But how do you see yourselves using motivational interviewing? And in the context of AEL, what are some of the areas that you would use this? So I'd like to see what you can share in the chat. What comes to mind? How or when would you be able to use motivational interviewing? Yes, so Ms. Sanchez says not only with the students, but also with the staff. Absolutely. And Suzanne says, when asking new students what caused them to start ESL. Yes, you want to know, why are you here? They're not there because they're free ESL classes and they have availability. There's some type of barrier that has caused them to recognize they need that language proficiency support. And you want to know what that looks like. Linda says, for GED students prepping for their exams by eliminating all 4 subjects. When students are unsure if to bump up to a higher level class. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that is a good one, right? Students are reluctant. They're always nervous about moving up for the most part. There are others, go-getters, who jump at the chance. So Ms. Sanchez says, if staff is having a challenge with a student or other staff, we could discuss the situation to get a better understanding of what is going on. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Great examples. I appreciate you sharing and your thoughts on how you can use these techniques.
Yes, and what are some examples you can think of? I'm thinking definitely at intake, right? When a student comes in to first enroll and we want to get to know a little bit about them, we could use some motivational interviewing. And what are some other ideas that come to mind?
I think as we're transitioning our students from our high school equivalency to the IET, we talk about some of the things that we've seen that maybe are challenges or even our successes that they've challenges and successes, to be able to transition them, but point out, you're doing great with the studying. I like that you're doing X as you study. This is, you're going to take this on as you go into your IET, just kind of get them ready for that next step. And Suzanne says, intake, job interviews, mock job interviews with students, goal setting, performance planning. So yeah, I think it's important to highlight what those students have been successful at, and even maybe to point out some of the things that might be blocking them from being successful. again,
Okay,
it's not always sunshine, right? We have barriers. Thank you, Suzanne. Some of the barriers. So yeah, I think it's important to even highlight some of those and work with them. Remember to either bring about change or not. And that way we know, are you ready for that IET? Are you really ready for that IET? Because we want to be able to keep our students moving forward as opposed to not. And Eduardo says students with disabilities, and that's another aspect, yeah, that we need to think about with our students. So thank you all. And Donna says increases the connection for resilient students. Thank you, Donna. Definitely. I like that.
And Suzanne Klein added when there is a lot of missed classes. So for retention, that's a good point. Classroom management for goal setting, using at intake, like how we mentioned before. So it's all around us. And of course, like Susan said, we can use it with our staff. Why not? Why can't we use it in our homes? It doesn't even have to apply it strictly to our professional lives, but it's a method of communication, right? That we can, and why are we communicating? Because we want to get more information. We want to get a better understanding of that other individual. So why not utilize these elements and qualities and skill sets in our everyday conversations?
All right. Thank you, Liz. So let's review our objectives. So we introduced the research-based strategies using the student interviewing or the MI principles. We learned what motivational interviewing is not. And then we also learned how to ask the right questions to strengthen the student's motivation. We went through all of those different exercises. So we want to thank you for being with us today and for being such great participants and participating in the chat. Y'all did awesome. So we hope that you take what you got today in terms of the motivational interviewing and the principles and the qualities, and take this and work on incorporating this into your conversations with your students. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you for joining us.
We hope you enjoyed this pre-recorded webinar. After you have passed the final test with a score of 80% or greater and have received your certificate of completion, please take a few moments to complete the course evaluation. Participant feedback helps Train PD at TCAL continue to provide high-quality professional development. To leave a course feedback, please go to the completed portion of your transcript. To do this, hover over the My Learning tab and select View Your Transcript. Click on the drop-down arrow next to the word Active and select Completed. Then, click Evaluate in the drop-down menu next to the course you just completed. Please note that your feedback is greatly appreciated.